My name's Daniel, I'm 26, and for most of my life, I genuinely thought that if I just worked hard enough, stayed patient enough, and kept showing up for my family, they'd eventually notice. That somewhere down the line, they'd look at me not as the awkward, quiet kid in the corner, but as someone worth being proud of. Maybe that's why I spent the better part of my 20s trying to be someone they couldn't ignore. The late nights at the library, the double shifts, the sacrifices no one ever really saw or cared to ask about. I wasn't doing it for strangers. I was doing it for the people I thought mattered the most. Graduating with my master's degree was supposed to be the moment all of that hard work finally paid off. It was a small ceremony, nothing flashy. No limos, no over-the-top celebrations, just a couple hundred students who had clawed their way across the finish line, same as me. And I wanted them there. My mom, my stepdad, my cousins, even my aunt who once joked at Christmas that I'd read so many books I'd forgotten how to be normal. I still wanted them there. So I made it as easy for them as I could. I paid for their flights. I booked their hotel rooms, making sure the hotel had a pool and was near the beach because I knew they'd complain otherwise. I even made detailed itineraries, ceremony times, recommended restaurants, directions from the airport. I could feel the exhaustion in my bones the week leading up to it. Between last-minute thesis edits, part-time work, and making sure every tiny travel detail was nailed down, I barely slept. But every time I felt overwhelmed, I told myself it would be worth it when I saw them in the crowd, clapping, smiling, finally seeing me, finally being proud. The morning of my graduation, I woke up earlier than I needed to. I stood in front of the mirror, straightening my gown, adjusting my cap, checking and rechecking my cords and stole. I even practiced a little smile, not too big, not too fake. Just hopeful. Around 9 a.m., I sent out a quick text to the family group chat. Ceremony starts at 11. Can't wait to see you all there. Thanks again for coming. I waited for the little gray bubbles to pop up. Nothing. At first, I shrugged it off. Maybe they were getting ready. Maybe they were on their way. The ceremony was held outdoors, under this big white tent that flapped lazily in the coastal breeze. Families trickled in, parents holding bouquets, little siblings with homemade signs, grandparents beaming behind thick glasses. I scanned every face that arrived, feeling my heart rate pick up every time a group approached. By 10:45, my palms were sweaty. By 11 o'clock, my seat was vibrating from how hard I was tapping my foot against the metal riser. My friend Monica leaned over and whispered, "Hey, your family here yet?" I swallowed the lump rising in my throat and forced a laugh. They're probably parking. They weren't parking. They weren't stuck in traffic. They weren't lost. At exactly 11:15, as my university's president was midway through a speech about perseverance and pride, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I shouldn't have checked it. I knew that. But something gnawed at me until I did. It was a group text from my cousin, accompanied by a photo. In the photo, my family was sprawled across beach chairs on a sun-soaked shore, red Solo cups in hand, sunglasses glinting. Someone had scribbled across the sand with a stick, "Family Beach Day." Underneath the photo, my mom had texted, "We've got better things to celebrate today. So proud of everyone." My heart didn't sink, it shattered. Another message popped up. My cousin Rachel, never one to waste an opportunity to throw a jab, added, "Good luck being the smartest nobody we know." Then a bunch of laughing emojis. I don't remember much of the ceremony after that. I sat there, wooden and frozen, smiling when I was supposed to smile, clapping when I was supposed to clap, but feeling like every cell in my body was trying to shrink itself smaller and smaller. When they finally called my name, I stood up robotically, walked across the stage, shook the dean's hand, and took my diploma folder. No cheering from the crowd. No whistles. No applause from my corner. Just silence. I lingered on the outskirts after the ceremony ended, pretending to check my phone, pretending to be busy, pretending not to notice the other families crowding around their graduates with hugs and flowers and proud tears. Monica and a few others invited me out to lunch to celebrate, but I declined. I made up some excuse about being tired, about needing to pack. The truth was, I couldn't bear the idea of sitting at a table, eating a meal meant for celebration, while the empty space beside me screamed the truth I'd been running from for years. They didn't care. And maybe they never had. I spent the next few days and a days, packing up my tiny apartment, filling boxes with the bits and pieces of the life I'd scraped together. Every now and then I'd get another beach photo from the family group chat, a bonfire night, a seafood dinner, even a parasailing adventure. No apologies. No explanations. Just photo after photo, like salt in a wound they didn't even bother pretending not to see. When I finally landed my first job offer, a research position at a tech firm that, frankly, I didn't even think I was qualified for, I stared at the offer letter for a long time. $18,000 signing bonus. A salary that was more money than my family combined had probably ever seen in one place. A relocation stipend, benefits, the works. And still, when I picked up the phone to call my mom, thumb hovering over her contact name, a part of me hesitated. Somewhere deep down, some rusted out, naive part of me still wanted to hear her voice light up with pride. Still wanted to hear, "I'm so proud of you, Danny." But I didn't call. I couldn't. Not after everything. Instead, I did something else. Something quieter. I took a photo of the paycheck stub when it arrived, crisp and almost unreal in my trembling hands. I composed a short message in the group chat. No anger. No sadness. No accusations. Just the photo and the words. "Thanks for the support. Hope the beach trip was worth it." I didn't stay in the chat to watch the fallout. I muted the conversation, packed the last box in my apartment, and turned the key in the lock for the final time. But by the time my flight landed in my new city a few hours later, my phone had exploded with notifications. Messages from my mom, from Rachel, from my aunt. Even my stepdad, who never texted, had sent a clumsy "let's talk" message. They begged. They pleaded. They said it had been a misunderstanding, that they didn't realize how important it was to me, that I should have said something if I was upset. Rachel even tried to joke it off, sending a gif of someone diving into a pool of money. I didn't reply. I scrolled through their desperate messages once, twice, feeling something inside me finally settle. Like the shifting of tectonic plates after an earthquake. Something irreversible. But I wasn't finished yet. In the days that followed, their messages kept coming. A steady, pathetic trickle at first, then a flood. Calls at all hours. Emails filled with guilt trips. Long paragraphs about how family forgives, and we can't let a silly misunderstanding tear us apart. My mom even tried sending old photos. Me as a kid at Christmas, me blowing out candles, me hugging my cousins at birthday parties, as if memories alone could patch the crater they'd blown open. Each message felt like someone knocking on a locked door they had kicked down themselves. At first, I just watched. I didn't respond, didn't block them yet either. I was curious, morbidly so, to see how far they would go to rewrite history. They told themselves they hadn't meant to hurt me, that it wasn't personal, that it had just been one beach day, as if that one day hadn't been the culmination of a lifetime of being sidelined, forgotten, and treated like an afterthought. And then came the real reason for their sudden concern. Rachel let it slip first, because of course she did. She texted, "Hey, you're doing well now, right? Maybe you can help out a bit?" Mom's car broke down and everyone's been pitching in. 2 minutes later, a message from my mom. "Danny, honey, it would mean a lot if you could loan us some money to get back on our feet. It's been a rough year, you know how it is." Rough year. Right. I could practically hear her voice in my head, all syrupy sweetness layered over the hard steel of expectation. Not an ounce of shame. Not an ounce of accountability. Just the same old story. Daniel will fix it. Daniel owes us. After all we've done for him. The thing was, and it still blows my mind to this day that they didn't see it. They had spent my entire life teaching me exactly what not to do. How not to treat people. How not to confuse loyalty with obligation. The temptation to just block them right then and there was overwhelming. I hovered over the block contact button more times than I could count. But I realized something. That would be too easy. Too clean. Too fast. They needed to feel it. So I replied. Just once. It was a group text. Simple. Plain. Deadly. "I'm not a bank. I'm not a doormat. I'm not your second chance. I'm done." And with that, I blocked them all. Every last one of them. My mom, my stepdad, Rachel, my aunt, even the random cousins who chimed in with their fake little "miss you, bro" texts after years of radio silence. Gone. The silence afterward was deafening in the best possible way. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought cutting them out cleanly would mean peace. And for a while, it did. I focused on settling into my new apartment, throwing myself into my new job. I met people who liked me for me, not for what I could provide or how much I could tolerate. For the first time in my life, I wasn't shrinking myself to fit into a mold that never fit me. But entitlement has a way of festering. And my family wasn't the type to take no for an answer without trying to flip the board over entirely. About 3 weeks after cutting them off, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note. My mom's handwriting, looping, and familiar, along with a photocopy of a family photo. The letter started off pretending to be sweet, full of "we love you" and "we're so proud." But it didn't take long to shift. She wrote about how money wasn't everything, how family was all that mattered, how I was being selfish, cruel, cold. How disappointing it was that after everything they had sacrificed for me, I would throw them away over one silly beach day. And then, buried halfway down the page, the real dagger. "If you can't forgive us, maybe it's better if you just send some money so we can all move forward separately. It's the least you could do for the people who raised you." The least I could do. I sat at my tiny kitchen table, letter in one hand, the photocopied family photo in the other, and I laughed. Really laughed. Deep, uncontrollable laughter that echoed around my empty apartment. Because finally, I understood. They had never seen me as family. They had seen me as an investment, a backup plan, a future piggy bank. And when I refused to play along, when I dared to choose myself over their endless demands, I became the villain in their story. There was a time when that would have broken me, when I would have crawled back, apologized for making them feel bad, written a check just to make the guilt go away. But not anymore. Instead, I pulled out a fresh envelope. No note, no message, just the photocopied family photo, ripped neatly down the middle. I mailed it back to the return address. And then I poured myself a drink, stood out on my tiny balcony overlooking the city skyline, and let the evening breeze wash over me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for anyone to be proud of me. I was proud of myself. And that was enough. Or at least, it should have been. Because just when I thought they couldn't stoop any lower, they found a way. It started with the friend requests. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, random people popping up on my new social media accounts. People I hadn't spoken to since high school, distant relatives I barely remembered meeting at family reunions, old coworkers of my mom's. Their messages were almost laughably transparent. "Hey, your mom was just talking about you. Said you're doing so well. We should catch up." Or, "Your family's really been worried about you. Maybe you should give them a chance to explain." Or, my personal favorite, "Family's family, man." No matter what. It didn't take a genius to figure out what was happening. My mother, Rachel, maybe the whole circus, had put out feelers. They couldn't reach me directly. So they sent flying monkeys, people who didn't know the full story, who saw me as the villain because that's what they'd been fed. At first, I ignored it, deleted the requests, muted the DMs, tightened my privacy settings. But the messages kept coming, and every single one scraped at the same raw nerve. The part of me that still, deep down, hated being misunderstood. Hated being painted as cruel when all I had done was finally stand up for myself. One night, about a month after I'd sent back the ripped photo, my old high school friend Chris called me. I almost didn't pick up. The urge to stay silent, to stay safe, was strong, but curiosity won out. "Hey man," he said, a little awkwardly. "Look, I know we haven't talked in forever. I'm not trying to get in your business. Just thought you should know." He hesitated. "They're posting about you. Your cousin Rachel, your mom. Facebook, Instagram, even a couple of those old church forums your mom still lurks on. Making it sound like you abandoned them when they needed you most. Like you just turned your back on your family for no reason." I pressed the phone harder against my ear, my heart beating a slow, angry rhythm. "What exactly are they saying?" I asked, my voice deceptively calm. Chris sighed. "Man, it's ugly. They're saying you got too good for your family once you got your degree. That you forgot where you came from. Your mom even posted this long thing about how she worked 3 jobs to put you through school and how you left her stranded in her old age." I almost laughed out loud at that one. My mom hadn't put a single dime toward my education. I had juggled part-time jobs, scholarships, and student loans while she and my stepdad bought new furniture and took family trips, trips that never once included me. Chris lowered his voice. "They're trying to turn everyone against you, man. And some people are buying it." I thanked him, hung up, and sat there for a long time, staring at the wall. The thing about lies, especially the kind told out of desperation, is that they can only thrive where truth is absent. My family had always been good at controlling the narrative. They'd spent my entire life telling everyone what a weird, ungrateful, selfish kid I was. I just never thought they'd still be playing the same games when we were all supposed to be adults. I didn't want to engage. I didn't want to stoop to their level. But if they wanted a story, if they wanted an audience, fine. I'd give them one. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, I sat down at my kitchen table, cracked my knuckles, and opened a blank post. No theatrics, no cursing, no rage. Just the plain, unvarnished truth. I wrote about the scholarships, the jobs, the late nights and early mornings. I wrote about how I had saved for months to bring them out for my graduation, and how they had left me standing alone while they partied at the beach. I wrote about the text messages, the jokes, the laughing emojis. I included screenshots, not doctored, not exaggerated, just raw and damning. I wrote about how they only reached out once they realized they might benefit from my success. And finally, I wrote, family is who shows up for you, not who shows up when they want something from you. I hit post, and then I logged off. I didn't stay to watch the fireworks, but Chris sent me screenshots later, comments pouring in, mutual acquaintances asking hard questions, strangers chiming in with support. Some of the flying monkeys tried to defend my mom and Rachel, but they were drowned out by people who could see the truth for what it was. The real nail in the coffin came a few days later when my old neighbor, Mrs. Delaney, sweet but sharp as a tack, chimed in with her own story. She talked about how she used to see me dragging garbage bags full of soda cans to the recycling center for extra cash. How my mom once bragged at a neighborhood barbecue about using my scholarship refund check to treat herself to a spa day. There was no spinning it after that. My mom deleted her posts. Rachel made her accounts private. The flood of messages from distant relatives slowed, then dried up completely. I thought that would be the end of it, that they'd finally slink off into whatever corner of the world would still have them, nursing their wounded pride. But, like I said before, entitlement festers. And when you take away a narcissist's golden goose, they don't just give up. They escalate. They didn't just slink away quietly. Of course they didn't. About 2 months after my post went viral enough to make them retreat into embarrassed silence, I got a letter at my new job. Not a normal letter, either. It was a formal notice. From a lawyer. My mother was threatening to sue me. The letter was filled with ridiculous claims that I had defamed her character, caused her emotional distress, that my post had damaged her reputation within the community, which was rich, considering she didn't even have a job or a meaningful community anymore. At first, I just stared at it, dumbfounded. Part of me thought it was a prank. Another part of me, the part that had spent too many years tiptoeing around her anger, felt that old, familiar spike of fear. What if she could ruin everything? What if this followed me forever? I immediately called a lawyer, a real one, and laid everything out. I showed him the post, the screenshots, the years of emails and texts backing up my side of the story. He barely hid his amusement. Let her try, he said. She doesn't have a case. This isn't defamation. This is you telling the truth. Still, to be safe, I had to spend real money. Money I could have used furnishing my apartment or paying off loans, just to draft a formal response. My lawyer sent a cease and desist right back to her lawyer, warning that if they didn't drop it immediately, I would countersue for harassment and court costs. It worked. A week later, I got a short email from her lawyer saying they were withdrawing any potential claims at this time. No apology, no acknowledgement, just silence. But the damage wasn't completely undone. I learned quickly that once someone shows the world they're willing to burn you to the ground for their own pride, you never really stop looking over your shoulder. I tightened all my privacy settings. I changed passwords. I flagged any mutual contacts who might leak my information. I was done giving second chances. I thought about moving again, changing cities, starting fresh somewhere they couldn't find me. But I realized something even better. I didn't have to run. They had lost access to me. They had lost the right to know where I lived, where I worked, who my friends were. They had traded proximity for lies, and I wasn't about to hand it back to them out of fear. Instead, I doubled down on building my life. Work was going better than I could have dreamed. I started climbing the ladder quickly, project lead by the end of my first year, junior manager by the middle of the second. Turns out, when you're not dragging a 30-ton emotional anchor behind you, it's amazing how fast you can move. I made friends, real ones. People who celebrated my wins without secretly resenting me. People who didn't expect me to shrink myself to make them feel better. I even fell in love. Her name was Sarah, and she had this laugh that made you feel like you'd just won a game you didn't even know you were playing. She didn't know my past at first, and when I finally told her, all of it, the messy, ugly parts, she didn't flinch. She just held my hand and said, You deserved better. I'm glad you didn't settle for less. For a long time, I carried this heavy question inside me. Was I wrong for walking away? Was there something more I could have done? But as the years passed, as the promotions came, and the friendships deepened, and the quiet, steady joy of living an honest life without their chaos took root, the question stopped haunting me. I wasn't wrong. I was just finally free. Once, around Christmas, I got a package. No return address. Inside was a battered photo album, the same one my mom used to pull out every Thanksgiving to embarrass me in front of relatives. Inside the front cover was a single sticky note. You'll always be part of this family, whether you like it or not. I laughed. I really, truly laughed. And then I closed the album, walked it straight to the dumpster behind my building, and let it fall into the trash with a satisfying thud. Because the truth is, family isn't who claims you. It's who chooses you. And every day I woke up surrounded by people who loved me not for what I could give them, not for the role I could play in their sad little dramas, but for who I really was. I knew I had chosen right. Years later, when Sarah and I got married, I stood at the altar without a single trace of regret. My side of the aisle wasn't packed with relatives in cheap suits forcing fake smiles. It was filled with friends, mentors, co-workers, and a few incredible souls who had become more like family to me than my blood relatives ever were. I thought maybe, for a second, my mom would try to crash it, make some grand gesture or scene. But she didn't. Maybe by then, even she realized I was no longer someone she could summon back with a few guilt-ridden words or fake tears. I never heard from her again after that last package. Not for birthdays. Not for holidays. Not when promotions were announced or awards were won. And not when, years later, Sarah and I had a child of our own. I didn't send a birth announcement. I didn't feel obligated to. My son would grow up never knowing the kind of cruelty that masqueraded as family loyalty. He would never have to sit quietly at a table while the people who were supposed to love him laughed at his dreams. He would know real love, real pride, real support. And that, more than anything else, is how I won. I didn't win by getting the last word. I didn't win by fighting them until they admitted defeat. I won by living well, by thriving, by building a life so full, so rich, that there wasn't room left for their poison. Looking back now, sometimes I think about that day on the beach, them laughing, posing for selfies, thinking they were making some grand point about how little I mattered. And I just smile. Because they were right, in a way. I did become someone they couldn't recognize, someone they couldn't control. I became someone who didn't need their approval to be happy. And nothing they could ever do will change that. Not now. Not ever.